Many little hammers and tools in the toolbox are common colloquial phrases used to describe successful and resilient strategies for managing weeds. Flame on is a phrase usually associated with the Human Torch character from Marvel's Fantastic Four, but we'll learn today how this can also be associated with tools for weed control. Good morning, everyone. I'm Stephen Galens with Practical Farmers of Iowa. Accompanying me behind the scenes is Haley Nelson. We are broadcasting live today with Noah Wendt and Caleb Akin from A&W Farms near Cambridge in Story County to learn about two different tools in the weed control toolbox, incorporating small grains into a crop rotation and flame weeding. But before we get started, like an old black and white movie, we start with the credits at the top. This event is a joint effort between Practical Farmers of Iowa and our partner, the University of Northern Iowa's Center for Energy and Environmental Education. Their Farming for Public Health initiative seeks to highlight land-based agricultural solutions that solve for a pattern of environmental issues that impact Iowa's health. Together, we're trying to include public health and medical practitioners in the conversation of agricultural practices that improve soil health, reduce inputs, and improve biodiversity. This field day is sponsored by the Iowa Organic Association. Since 2006, the Iowa Organic Association has led efforts to provide Iowans the information, support, and resources necessary to succeed in the organic industry. Our membership is a diverse community committed to advancing organic agriculture and food systems in Iowa. And by Pipeline Foods. Pipeline Foods is accelerating the availability and reliability of organic, non-GMO, and regeneratively grown food. We bring transparent, sustainable supply chain solutions to connect the dots for our farming partners and end users of organic grains and ingredients. And by Schooler, a 127-year-old company with more than $4 billion in sales. Schooler provides diverse supply chain solutions for end users and suppliers of grain, feed ingredients, and food ingredients. And by Wyffels Hybrids. Wyffels Hybrids is a U.S. family farm-owned, independent, hybrid seed corn company focused entirely on seed corn. Bigger isn't better, better is better when it comes to choices of non-GMO and traded technologies in quality seed corn. I'd also like to thank our A-level sponsors for supporting our entire field day season. We couldn't bring you all these virtual field days without the support of these organizations and institutions, and we thank them very much. Also like to thank our B-level sponsors as well for supporting our entire field day season. Again, we couldn't put on 60 virtual field days this year without the support of these groups and organizations. So thank you, thank you. A little bit about Practical Farmers of Iowa. PFI is a farmer member organization, which means we go where our farmers tell us to go. We achieve our mission by helping farmers connect and share knowledge in any which way. We're doing this today through a virtual field day. You can learn more about the many other great things we do with our members on our website. Okay, final bits of housekeeping. Here's how this virtual field day is going to go. We've got the rest of the hour. Noah is going to start by discussing their small grains crops and cover crops they're using in their organic crop rotations. They'll then discuss their flame weeder with some photos and pre-recorded video. And then Caleb will take over with a live look in the shop and the field. As far as Q&A is concerned, when Noah is finished with his remarks for small grains, we'll take a quick break for some Q&A. And then Caleb will take over to discuss the flame weeder. We'll open it up for more Q&A at the end. As we go, please enter any questions you have using the comment box in Facebook. I'll be monitoring those throughout, and then I'll relay them to Noah and Caleb during the Q&A portions. To get acquainted with the comment box, please let us know who you are and where you're from. Go ahead and type that in when you can. And finally, when we're done with the entire session, please tell us what you thought about this virtual field day. Virtual field days are new to us this year, and I'm sure they're new to all of you. We value your input, so I will post a link to a survey in the comment box. I'll do that now, and I'll do that again at the end of the event. And please let us know how we did, what you liked. And finally, All those who do fill out a survey will be entered into a drawing to win a PFI branded water bottle. So please let us know what you think. You might win something. Without further ado, I am going to hand it over to Noah and Caleb. Guys, it's all yours. Let's have a great day.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Excellent. This is Caleb Akin, standing to my right, and I am Noah Wendt. We're A&W Farms. We started farming in 2006 here in central Iowa. Cambridge is the main base where we're located. We farmed conventionally from 2006 until 2015, and we began to transition some of our acres from conventional commercial production into organic, and we've continued to transition more acres every year. Now we're up to about 800 acres that we farm either transitionally or organic, and we still have a portion of our operation that we farm commercially with regular commercial fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides, with an end goal that a majority of our operation would be organic by the time another 5 to 10 years. Definitely a learning process. We've had a lot of fun doing it. It's been just brought life back to the farm around here. We do a little bit of livestock traditionally. We've had a feedlot operation. We're kind of working away from that and working more into grazing some of the cover crops that we're using out on our organic ground. That's kind of a brief of what our operation is. I guess if you guys have any questions later about our operation, feel free to ask. But I'd like to get into the meat of the webinar here and again get started with field grains. So with small grains. So Haley, if you could start out with the first slide, I'll go ahead and go on that. So as we've got going on the organic part of our operation, we found out that small grains are a very, very key part to the success of the operation, not only from a weed control standpoint, but also for rotation to get soil health to where we need it to grow subsequent crops of corn and beans. Next slide. We've experimented with 3 different small grains: winter wheat, oats, and spring wheat. We do a little bit of rye, but mainly that is terminated prior to it heading out. We started with winter wheat in the year of 2019, and we planted some again this year. So we planted some this year, October 15th of 2019, behind an organic bean crop. We let that grow. It got a couple inches tall there in the fall, and it overwintered very nicely. And we came back in the spring to put our cover crop mix in around April 6th of 2020. We spread it out there with a broadcast spreader. In that mixture, that particular farm is right by where we have a building site and where we would want to graze. So on that mixture, we decided to go with 3 pounds of vernal alfalfa, 2.5 pounds of rape, 2.5 pounds of hairy vetch, 7.5 pounds of grass. We wanted the sorghum Sudan in there to get some grass in there to help in the case with the cattle potentially getting foamy bloat. We needed something in there to help buffer the rumen. Turnips in there just for a little more diversity within the soil. Kale, kind of another buffer there for their diet, and 6.5 pounds of medium red clover. After we spin spread that on the wheat that was probably 4 to 6 inches tall, we took a land roller across it, just a smooth land roller, to get that seed into the ground to help it germinate better. And we're probably about a week and a half off from combining that wheat, and then we'll let the cover crop grow up behind that and probably start grazing somewhere around the 1st to 2nd week of August. Next slide, please. So this is a picture about a week ago of that winter wheat field. As you can see, pretty nice stand, and it was starting to turn a little bit. Next slide. This is just a picture there of the undergrowth in that winter wheat. You can see some clover, a turnip in there, some kale. Next slide. Another picture of the undergrowth in there. This one, you might be able to see some hairy vetch. I think that picture I had some hairy vetch climbing up one of the wheat plants. One of the things that we were concerned about is getting that cover crop in too early and it overgrowing the wheat. So that was why we decided to delay till about when that wheat was 6 inches tall. And I think it's been effective because I don't think this growth is going to affect our harvest much. We use a swather to swath it in a windrow and then pick it up with a pickup head about a day later. And usually it feeds nicely and cuts nicely. Next slide, please. So then our second one is oats. Obviously a spring seeded crop. We were able to get in at a decent time this year, around April 2nd on most of our oats, where we had about 3.5 bushel of oats is what we seeded, with 2.5 pounds of vernal alfalfa and 5.5 pounds of medium red clover. And that all went down with the drill and drilled in 7.5-inch rows. We wanted to come back. We found out that we didn't quite get enough medium red clover and vernal alfalfa on. So I wanted to come back and put a little bit more on some of that. So we had that, added probably another 2 pounds of clover and another pound of alfalfa in with 2.5 pounds of rape, 3.75 pounds of hairy vetch, and 1.5 pounds of turnips. And this was on ground that's a little further away from our home base that will not be grazed, but we wanted to add some of those other cover crops in there just for diversity and soil health purposes. We're really seeing a lot of benefit out of that. And to get us some more nitrogen on the subsequent corn crop. Next year, that particular field will be certified organic in corn in 2021. Yeah, go ahead, next slide. So here's just a picture of that oat field. You maybe see a little unevenness out there. We had spread some chicken litter on it, and that just kind of an inconsistent spread, but overall, I think it looks real nice. Next slide. Here's a picture of the undergrowth in there. You can see the clover and the alfalfa coming in. Next slide. Another picture there, there's some rape. You can see, I'm not sure if you can see a turnip in that one or not. Go to the next slide, and might be a turnip in the next one. Yeah, there's some turnip in there. So pretty impressed. That we did the same, just spin spread on the extra clover, turnip, rape, and vetch, and then land rolled it in. Next slide, please. There you go. There's a good sized turnip. Those things, they grow real fast. Next slide. So then the third one, and this is our first year experimenting with this, it's spring wheat. Part of it was just because we didn't want to put all of our eggs in one basket with doing oats as far as our spring seeded crop. So we decided to do some spring wheat that we put in at 75 pounds per acre. And we drilled down with that 2.5 pounds of vernal alfalfa and 5.5 pounds of medium red clover. Not quite the rate that we wanted, but we were up against the rain and didn't have time to really get the drill tuned in to where we wanted it to be. So I came back and added some other cover crop mix with it. And once again, we're up against the rain, and I just kind of grabbed what was ever in the seed shed and threw it in the spin spreader and went out there. And we ended up with a little 1.5 pounds of rape and 1 pound of kale. This field will not be grazed after harvest, but we're hoping that we see benefits from that diversity in there. And, you know, we didn't get quite the amount of alfalfa or clover on there that we wanted, but we'll probably supplement a little more with some chicken litter, because this field also will be going to organic corn in 2021. Likewise, we land rolled that cover crop in. Next slide. So here's a picture of the spring wheat. Just it's got a tinge to it. That'll probably be the last thing that we harvest after oats this year. Next slide. Another picture there. We had a nice stand. It's going to help a lot with weed control. Next slide. There you can see clover and alfalfa coming in underneath that spring wheat cover. Next slide. So we didn't have this stuff out of the shed, so you just have to bear with us on the pictures, but here's our old John Deere swather. It's a 20-foot pull behind swather, pretty self-sufficient rig. We just put it on a 1066 International tractor and pull it down the road and fold it out when we get to the field, and it goes. Next slide. And there's our pickup head. It's kind of hard to see, but we put that on a John Deere 70 series combine and pick up what the swath had done there. Generally, I think we're about a day to 2 days after it's swathed is when we pick it up and combine it. Next slide. Before we go to questions, I want to explain just a little bit about the small grains. We really view them as the foundation for the weed control and also for our nutrients for the subsequent year's crops. And we just think we got to get that right. And that's why we put quite a bit of time into it, even though it might not be a real high income producing crop. It's going to make the next year's crop real income producing. And it's a sustainable way that we want to be running our operation too, by having something grow out there all the time. And we're starting to head in the direction, and we'll get into this later, of maybe moving into no-till organic type situation. Thus the reason for working on this flame weeder, getting it tuned in to where we could go in after the year after a small grain crop, where we have a nice stand of clover and alfalfa, and possibly burn some strips out there to plant into. And we know for weed control, we got to have that cover crop that's planted with the small grains. We got to have it in good shape to make that weed control for the next year in a no-till situation successful. That's all I've got. I'm ready for any questions on the small grain part.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Noah. Actually, we don't have any questions yet regarding small grains. So if you're comfortable, we can move on to the flame weeder, to the main event.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Why don't we go ahead?
Caleb said it.
If any come in, I'll relay them to you.
Can you hear me, Stefan?
Yeah, and actually, here's a question about grazing the cover crop after winter wheat. How long do you typically try to graze? How many grazing days, or how long do you try to graze after that winter wheat cover crop mix?
Okay. Question was, how many days do we graze on the cover crop mix after the winter wheat? Well, we rotationally graze, so we're going to set that field up. It's an 80-acre field. We're going to set it up with enough animal units to graze it on into mid-October, early November. So we just have to kind of play it by ear and see how it goes, but try to match up the number of head there, and we move them twice a day, 2-3 times a day. Try to get that number of head to match up with what that field is producing. We really only want to graze off the top 50% at the most, so it becomes tricky coming up with the right number of head to do it.
Great. Okay, one more question in the small grains portion. What's the next crop after the winter wheat that is the cover crop that is grazed following the winter wheat? You mentioned corn after your oats and spring wheat cover crops. How about after the winter wheat cover crop?
Well, the winter wheat goes with the cover crop that goes before the corn. So usually after corn, traditionally we would be putting in rye in the fall and going to beans the next year. So we would probably be able to graze that rye from, say, mid-March till early June of the next year. But it depends a lot on what our crop rotation is and what the economics of growing beans is at that point too.
Okay, great. Why don't we move on to the flame weeder? Thanks, Noah.
Okay. Yep. Let's move on. I called this, and kind of jokingly, we've done a lot of experimenting with this. And so flame weeding and corn, an experimental approach to flame weeding. Next slide, please. So just to line it out, and Caleb's going to go through this a little bit more when he has the flame weeder out, and then he's showing you some of the things on it. Some of the goals that we're wanting out of the flame weeding is to reduce the tillage on our operation, have a more flexible approach to killing weeds, You can run it when cultivators can't run and it's too wet, in other situations with cultivators or other mechanical equipment. And you can kill the weeds in the row a lot better than what some of this other mechanical equipment is doing. So we wanted a flame weeder that could perform a wide range of functions, whether it was flaming in the row, flaming between the row, possibly having open flames without hoods, and ultimately wanting to move more towards a no-till organic system. Next slide. Our traditional methods of weed control, and I'll show pictures here real quickly. Wide variety, a disc, field cultivator, rotary hoe, tine weeder, row crop cultivators. We've used the flame weeder a little bit in the past, and we did use a lightning weeder, electric weeder last year a little bit also. Next slide, please. So there's just simple, a disc. We knew when we got into organic that we were probably going to need a nice disc, so we went ahead and bought a nice sunflower disc. Next slide, please. Our field cultivator is just a DMI field cultivator. I think it's got 5 rows of shovels and then 4-bar harrow on the back of it. Next slide, please. There's the harrow on the back. It's a 3-bar harrow. Yeah, I got a picture of that coming up. This here on the back 2 rows, we tried this year, and I think it worked pretty well. It really made the tractor pull hard, but we were running 9-inch sweeps on the whole cultivator, and we were still seeing some streaks out there, so we decided to put 12-inch sweeps on the back 2 rows to help with killing the weeds. Next slide, please. And then our front 3 rows has 9-inch sweeps on it too. Next slide. Another tool in the toolbox there is the rotary hoe, John Deere rotary hoe. We make sure that all the wheels got good bearings in them and are going to be running and in good shape. Go through all that at the beginning of every year. Next slide, please. This is just a quick video of there's on the little sand here field. We're picking up a lot of dirt, and we try to run it as fast as we can. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a tine weeder. We started this about 3 years ago. Next slide, I think we got a video coming up that'll kind of show what we're using that for. There is just a picture of it in the field, tine weeding some beans. Another good method just to loosen them up. Is this the video? Okay. Okay, so there you can see that you have to be careful with that because it does kind of get rough in the crop if you get too aggressive with it, but it's another effective way to get in the row. Next slide.
Noah, can you repeat what you just said while the video was playing of the tine weeder?
Okay, yeah. That we got to be careful just how aggressive we get with that because it can really lay the crop over and do some damage. So it's still a good tool to get the weeds in the row. Were you able to hear that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so here's on the next one, a row crop cultivator. This is just an older Case IH row crop cultivator. Next slide. And the newer one that's a little bit more aggressive as far as the shovels and the springs on it go. Okay, next slide. And then we equip all this stuff with navigation. Okay, we equip all this stuff with navigation equipment, slide hitches on the 3-point, and auto steer on the tractors themselves. This is one of the cultivators we use, a Sukup high residue cultivator. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so there's just some of the equipment in the cab. Let's skip past this one. I want to give Caleb a little more time here explaining the flamer. So let's skip past that one. Okay, so here's kind of what it looks like after we get done with all that mechanical stuff. There's still weeds there and close to the row. So we're concerned about that. We don't want that. Next slide, please. So traditional mechanical weeding is not getting the weeds in the row. We wanted to design a flame weeder that could go in the row and between the rows, and wanted a flame weeder that could perform well in short and tall corn. Next slide, please. So another picture, the weeds in the row, you can see buttonweed in there, and that has the potential to outgrow the corn because it grows pretty fast too. Next slide, please. Another picture of that. Next slide. Okay, so here's the flame weeder. This should be a video. So there you can see the hood that Caleb designed gets down in there and rubs up against the row, and it's probably leaves about a 4-inch strip there along the row. So you got to have the slide hitch on the 3-point of the tractor and some guidance on the tractor helping you out, so we're not killing corn. So go to the next slide. Okay, that there was a real good video of just how that was meant to follow down the row, and you can see the flames shooting out of there, and a lot of reasons why we have the hood there is just to keep the heat off the corn. Go ahead and play this one, Haley. Okay, this is a real cool video. Caleb did some videoing at night, so you could see a little bit better exactly what this machine is doing. So go ahead and play. These are the burners. Go ahead and play that, Haley. Okay, go ahead and play this one, Haley. Give them a good idea. Okay, there you can see it. Those pictures at night really do it a lot of justice about how it gets down in the row and how that flame acts. Go ahead and play that one, Haley. Go ahead and play this one, Haley. Okay, that one there showed the view from the cab and what we're using there in the cab as far as guidance equipment goes, cameras and the slide hitch and all that. It really makes a lot of difference. Okay, play the next one, Haley. Okay, go ahead and play this one too, Haley. Okay, so all that was on taller corn. Can you hear me okay yet, Stefan?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Thanks, Noah.
Excellent. All that was on taller corn. We had a later planted field that we moved down to yesterday and tried it here on this shorter corn. So if you want to play that, Haley, just to give them an idea how this goes through the shorter corn, I think it's going to be a good system for us. Okay, go ahead and play this one too. Okay, that particular field had in winter wheat. It didn't have a good stand, so we mowed it and baled it and dissed it and field cultivated it and planted corn. And you can only imagine that it was pretty cloddy. And so we were having a heck of a time getting a row crop cultivator to go through it. So we thought, well, let's take the weeder down through there. And after experimenting with that yesterday, I think that's going to be a really neat option that we can come in and flame weed that shorter corn and then come back probably in another 2 weeks and flame the taller corn. And I think we'll be really effective at getting a lot of that in the row and in between the row. So picture was just taken 2 hours after that flamer went through yesterday. And you can see that plant is already dying. Go ahead to the next slide. And then here's some of the grass. There was a lot of foxtail out there. And you can see how close we got to the row, the corner row there. So I think it's working effectively. And next one. And that's it. So now I'm going to hand it off to Caleb. He's going to show you the equipment here. Just some of the experimenting that we did. We'll actually show the flame weeder, and we'll step out to one of the fields here of the taller corn that we did the weeding on.
Can you hear me, Stefan?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Caleb, go for it.
Okay. So trying to switch to the no-till organic, we need to do several different things for weed control with a weed burner. Last year we tried no-tilling beans into some rye. The rye was not tall enough to roll or crimp effectively, so we decided to go ahead and no-till it anyway and using the weed flamer for weed control. So the first setup we had was this hood here. We mounted it on the bar. This is just a representative one, but we mounted the torches in the top, and then we no-till planted it, and then set this up to follow right on top of the planter. So all we were doing is burning a 12-inch strip right on top of where we planted. Once the beans came up, we needed to burn away from the row next to the beans, but we couldn't be too hot because beans don't take heat well. So the second generation that we built last summer was just with rolling shields off a regular cultivator. We mounted the torches on each side here. So the shields went right over the row of beans, and then the torches burnt on either side of that. It worked reasonably well. Having the torches out and exposed really allowed a lot of room for wind to be blowing. So if you had a windy day, you could see in the row, the heat would move back and forth. And in some cases, it would blow hard enough to come underneath the gaps on the side of the rolling shields out here, which would kind of ding the beans a little bit. So that worked okay. As the beans got taller, they would not fit underneath the rolling shield because they were taller than the axle point. So we built a third setup. This one was built to go between the row of beans. So the row of beans would be right here on each side, and then there'd be another hood outside of that. we built it at an angle so that the canopy would fit in the top. The side plates acted to keep as a heat shield. The torches were mounted each direction on the top here, so it would blow right in next to the base of the plant. Since we were running in standing rye that had not been rolled, we had a lot of trouble with plugging, and the straw was this tall still standing there. So we had to add these fingers that would force the straw to bend in under the torch, so it would burn it off and and if there's any tall weeds, it would push it down before it got to the torch. Some of the troubles we had was the straw would ride up on the front nose of this and wedge. It took multiple tries with the runners before we came up with this open design that went to the center. And it started working pretty good by the end. Another problem we had with this design was the toolbar was in front of it about here, and then we just had arms coming down and a pin so that this could pivot as it went through the field. The problem we had is if you hit a clod of dirt or you're really plugged up, it would catch here and stop, and then this whole hood would flip up and smash into the bar and pretty much mess up all your propane plumbing. So this year we decided to build a machine that would do all three of these jobs in one machine. That way we didn't have to have 3 toolbars set up and have 3 sets of plumbing and tanks. So I guess we'll step outside and take a look at what we came up with. It still needs some modification, but it's getting close. This is a machine that we were showing in the video a minute ago. Instead of going with a solid hood, we went into 2 halves. Each half has a torch mounted to it right up here in the front, and then the plumbing drops down to it. Now, to adjust for different crop sizes and crop heights, we made it pivot so that the torch and the hood roll out together to match. So if you have a small crop, you can put it right together like that. Or if you have a larger crop, you can drop it back. With the gauge wheels and the parallel links, these are regular cultivator units we stripped down. We can adjust how much room there is for fire to come out or not come out. That would depend on how high the ridge is where your crop is. You're going to need more clearance. Or if your crop's very small with no ridge, you're going to need much less clearance so the flame doesn't get into your desired crop. So that'll take care of small crops, and it'll take care of the larger crops and the larger canopy. Now, what we haven't showed you yet is how it works when you're trying to do a no-till situation and you want to burn right down on top of the strip where the planter went. And we'll show you real fast here. Alex and I will flip 2 of these row units around, and then you can see how that part will work. Okay, so now, since your row unit's still going to run like a regular cultivator would run between the row, and you would have planted right here on the regular crop row, in this situation, the crop would not be up yet. It'd be no-tilling beans into rye or corn and the clover. So we just need to kill a strip right on top of where we planted. So with this system, we can roll these hoods in till we get the desired width, and then set our height back down so it's relatively tight. And then these two burners will flame right on there. So this needs a little modification. It's not, we don't have our geometry quite right to get our full rotations without hitting hoses and torches, but it's a lot closer than where we were last year. That's how it would look. Then you would tighten that bolt back up to lock your position. You want to light it or? Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'll turn. All right. It's a 3-step process. You got to turn it to pilot, which is 10 pounds of vapor. That's just enough to keep the torches from blowing out when you're turning around. And then, so we'll turn it to vapor. We'll light them all by hand. And then we'll go back and we'll flip it to burn. And that switches from 10 pounds of vapor to 30 pounds of liquid. So it really roars. Yeah. Okay, so there we are at pilot, and then we will switch over to liquid. Oh, I don't know, can you hear this? All right, before we catch anything on fire, we'll shut her down. Oh. And so the other thing for next year is going to be steel wheels. Yeah, so there was a tire on fire there. Yesterday we were running and we have a camera that's set up to look down between the rows. So from the cab, you can tell how close you are. And we had a tailwind, so the wind was blowing the heat up under the tractor and melted my camera cable too. So we haven't quite nailed this down just yet, but it's killing weeds. So do you want to walk out and look at what we burned on Saturday? I think we got to go to the second 12 rows is where we had it running better. Okay, so this is the first field we messed with the other day. This is the taller corn of the group of videos you saw. The second 12 rows, we had it set up and running a little bit better. I don't know where you want to look. Here's a good spot to look. You want to just hold that now? Here's a good spot just to look and see. Knock the grass back pretty well. There are some green shoots coming, but that's how grass works with a weed burner. We got the edges of the corn. The main part of the corn still pretty good shape. This is some pretty short corn on some end rows. We can walk down here into some taller corn. Running just open torches, it seems like sometimes you can lose some of your heat with the wind, like we were saying. And it also seems like you can burn your corn crop a little bit. Okay, so here's one of the problems we're having with this, is we were running late, and this water hemp is taller than the flames, and it didn't go inside the hood, so it's still tall and healthy. Whereas this one went under the hood and got fried pretty well. I don't know if it'll kill it, but it should give the corn the advantage. So we need to run earlier, and we need to be able to tip our flame further up into the canopy so we can catch these, which is part of what I was trying to describe when you're looking at the machine. I don't know what else we have for weeds here. Grass is our biggest one on this size corn. Obviously the water hemp and ragweed to some extent, but grass is what we're really after, because that's the one that will just stay with you all season. Here's a water hemp that went under the hood and got burnt pretty well. And here is one that did not. So that's the next step for this weed burner, is to try and get them all and get them earlier. I don't know what you need next. Questions?
10:46. Stefan, we could probably roll on to questions, and then.
Stefan, do you want to go to questions next, or?
Sure. We've got one that just came in. Do you have any kind of emergency shut-off from the cab or any other kind of safety features in the event of a hose break or something like that?
As far as safety goes on this, we're probably pretty low in that department. From the cab, I can control my vapor valve and I can control my liquid valve, and then there's power to that panel. So if there's any loss of power at all, everything automatically will shut off. And then inside the tank, there's a safety valve. So if it starts to draw fuel too fast, there's a flow valve that just shuts to keep in an event where the top of the tank or the valve would break off, or you blew a main hose, it'll shut off. And we know that works because oftentimes when we switch from vapor to liquid, that valve will kick because we're pulling so hard on the system.
Okay, here's another question. Yeah, here's another one. What do you estimate your propane usage is per acre?
We're estimating, yesterday we had some pretty good numbers because we're filling and finishing in the same field, and we're running just over 5 gallons an acre. We're running a T-Jet flat fan stainless nozzle for our orifice and 30 pounds of liquid. So I haven't tried to do the math based on what a water sprayer would do to compare that. So I'm just going off of what the propane printout was, truck printout was, and how many acres we went across. I've heard of people going up to 10 gallons. That's a lot. That's a lot of heat. So I don't know if we can stay at 5 or 6. I guess we're happy with that. We haven't really experimented going up to 10. With the hoods, I feel like we hold the heat where we want it much more efficiently. So that's kind of part of the goal, holding the heat where we want it and to control the damage to the cash crop.
Sure. Well, how about can you talk to how fit or not fit the field has to be to use the flame weeder compared to the mechanical weed control? Can you speak to the advantages of maybe how wet or moist the soil can be, and you can still go with the flamer?
The example I'll give you on that is last year we had a farm that had very solid foxtail coming in to 3 or 4 inch tall corn. You could barely row the corn. It was so bad. And it was so muddy that we pulled in with a cultivator and the tractor wouldn't pull it. It was just sliming around in the mud. We got out of there, came back, got the flame weeder, and a couple hours later, it's just dry enough that with front wheel assisted duals, we could get across the soil. And those rolling shields that we showed you earlier were able to ride along essentially in the mud. And then the flame on each side was enough to set the grass back. It didn't kill the grass, but it slowed the grass down enough so that 4 or 5 days later we could come in with a cultivator, and the grass was about 1 inch tall and the corn now is 4 or 5 inches tall. So it bought us 4 days that we really, really needed. And think we have another tractor that's on tracks. I think it would go across wetter soil yet than a front wheel assist. I mean, we're going to try not to be in that position, and we were not going to be in this year because it's dry enough, but in years past, sometimes it would really make a difference in an emergency situation.
Great, thanks. Next question here. Any size point where you can't flame the corn? So I think the question is, how large will you let the corn get before you stop trying to run the flamer through?
Yesterday, I'll be able to tell you more in a couple of days. Yesterday, we ran it through corn that was almost as tall as the front tire on the tractor. We were carrying the toolbar almost as high as it would go, and we were shooting it down below the leaf canopy. I think with the shields, we're not getting the heat to the point where it's going to kill the corn, but it was getting into the grass pretty well. So I will know more about this in a couple of days. On the short corn, on the super short corn, your growth point's still pretty close to the ground. So hopefully with the shield, you're going to keep the heat away from your growth point. On soybeans, small beans are pretty fragile. You have to be very careful with them, getting too much heat on them. And last year with tall beans, I never killed any beans with a flamer, but we did catch some straw on fire, and a straw fire will kill beans. That can happen. So on that situation last year with a cover crop of rye that was dried out, we had to run while the dew was still on. So we could run from like 4 in the morning till 8 in the morning, and then we'd have to shut down so we didn't have any fires. But there was zero tillage on that farm, and the weeds were reasonably well controlled. They'd have been much better controlled if we'd have been prepared and been in there on time. But since we were building the weed burner as we went, we were pretty reasonably 2 weeks behind. So.
Okay, another question along that lines. You might have partially answered it, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you think you can get by flaming without any kinds of shields, or does that cause the heat to come up and damage the upper corn plant? And also, do you think you lose too much heat that way?
Yeah, all the above are the concerns. If you're running an open flame, let's just say, for example, shooting down here from both sides, your fires are going to converge here, and then most of your heat's going to kind of boil up through your canopy. Whereas with that shield, you're going to hold the heat under the shield, and it's going to kind of exhaust out the back or up between the shield. You have much less heat coming up through your canopy. So sometimes, like if we look down this field, like on the ends here, you can see where we stopped and we're messing with it. That's a lot of damage to the corn. It's just because we're stopped, obviously, but that's just a lot of heat coming up through the canopy. So that's what we're trying to avoid by not running open torches. The other thing with the open torches that we found when we were running those rolling shields on those beans was that the side wind would blow your heat back and forth, which is also kind of what I saw yesterday when the heat was blowing up underneath the bar and melting my camera wire and, well, catching that wheel on fire. So it's just, I don't know, I feel like you get a lot more control consolidating your heat and keeping it where you want it and not where you don't.
Great. Another question, what kind of guidance system are you using when running the flamer?
The guidance systems are the same. We have 2 tractors set up with guidance. We got a John Deere track tractor and this International front wheel assist. They both have ag leader auto steer. So the planter lines are saved, and then you load those planter lines in your auto steer on the cultivator machines, and that will get the tractor very, very close to where the planter ran. And then once the tractor's lined up and running down the row, we have a navigator guidance system that mounts where your quick hitch would between your tractor and between your cultivator or your flamer. And that very simply is hooked to the tractor and then hooked to the cultivator, and it slides back and forth. And what controls it is either you can run it manually from the cab based on what the camera looks like, or there's long fingers on the bottom of it, which if we have time, I guess we can go and look at again. But they just ride on each side of your corn row here. And if your machine gets off, they kind of swing back and forth. And there's a switch. There's a potentiometer that reads how far it's swung off from center. And then it activates the hydraulic valves that slide the hitch back. That way the tractor can be over to one side and the cultivator will still stay centered. So between auto steer and the slide hitches, it gives you a lot of time to pay attention to what your implement's actually doing. Previously, before auto steer, you spent a lot of time driving and not a lot of time paying attention to your implement. So we've had much more success with being able to pay closer attention. And it ups your on the tillage side, it ups your travel speed probably a mile an hour because you're that much more accurate, which allows you to pile much more dirt up against the plants in the row. So you get much better consistent weed control. Do we have time? Do you want to see how that hitch works, or?
Yeah, let's go for it. We've got 4 minutes left, and I don't have any questions in the queue, so let's go take a look.
Okay, we're going to go see how that hitch works. We got 4 minutes. Do you want me to hold that so I can just show in the cab? Can I see what I'm doing? Oh, all right. All right, I'll give you a brief overview outside, and then we'll get in the cab and I'll show you the controller. So this is the brand name. This one happens to be a Navigator. There's many, many out there. It hooks onto your regular 3-point links here, there, and below. And then on this side of it hooks onto this main plate's a quick hitch. There's your top link and your bottom links. And then this part slides in that track right there, which allows your implement to slide side and side. I'll show you the controller in the cab and start the tractor, and I can show you how that works. Okay, so here's the controller. Turn it on. Need your hydraulic lever, lock on all the time. This indicator here shows how far left and right you are, and the lights show which way it's trying to move. So what I'm going to do here in a second is I'll do this and turn the camera around so you can see the results of that. When I let go of the switch, it goes back to center. All right, same thing. You watch that angle bracket in the corner of the quick hitch. See it start to move. It'll slide, I think, close to 15 inches either way. So that's in the manual mode. I'll flip it to automatic, and I'll show you how the wands do it. Okay, so we're back on the back to where the hitch is. These are the wands. It's gonna be hard to get a shot of. Right. So if you're running in the field, that corner is gonna run right between those shields towards that other tractor. And these wands are gonna fall right on the edge of that. So I can give you a reference point. That thing moves. You bring the whole one way, it moves the way you dig into another tractor. And if you get too far over, the wand will slide on the other side of the corn row and it'll slide it back across. That's happening all the time. Once you're in the row and you turn the center on and it's dropping off, so you usually just sort of bounce back and forth like this. But if you're not paying attention driving or you ought to steer so slow, if you get on the slide out, this will say it is. Do you have any other questions, Stefan, or anything else you need to see?
Well, we're about at time, so I'll leave it to you guys for any final comments about your weed control strategies, or even parting comments about practical farmers and why you wanted to host this field day.
Well, the PFI has been very helpful to us. We've gotten a lot of information from their field days in other parts of the state. This virtual thing is kind of new to us, but we're giving it a try for sure. And some of the stuff you can't, people are trying stuff that no one else is doing, no manufacturers are doing yet. So you got to pick up every scrap of information you can get from everywhere you can find it. And so this is something that we're starting to have some progress with. So we figured we'd share it with everyone else. So maybe it'll do them some good.
Great. Thanks a lot, Caleb. Thank you very much, Noah. We appreciate you taking the time to put this together and have us out to your farm today. And we thank everybody for viewing online. I've dropped that link for providing feedback in the comment box. Please open that up and fill that out. And that's all we've got. So we'll bid you all farewell and have a great day, everybody. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you.